for the invitation to talk on this. It is in two parts, as you can see, but I've had to modify the first part to show you the background of these long-living destroyers from the First World War, V&W destroyers, through the British Admiralty and lasting through till post-World War II. The second part will not be the history of the ships, but it'll be specific to one of the modifications made to V&W ships in the beginning of World War II, and that will be the model, which I'll talk about later on this year. So there's two parts. The British Admiralty had developed the torpedo boat destroyer design, and several classes were available in the early part of World War I. You can see a typical one of that time. It's got 3 funnels, fairly low freeboard, 4-inch guns fore and aft, and possibly midships, but again all on one level. These were the M class, I repeat, M class, R class, and lastly the S class, all 1913-14 ships. Displacement of 1,100 tons, length 273 feet, and 4-inch guns with very little else, 2 torpedo tubes. However, by 1916, they decided that the ships were not adequate for intended roles, such as being able to keep up with the current battleships at the time in flotillas in the event of fleet actions against the enemy, which would be in the North Sea between Germany and Western Europe, Germany and the UK. Other countries, including Germany, USA and Russia, had similar designs, and here is the USS Claxton, I think a Wilkes class of ship, which typified the US designs of the era. Again, flush deckers like is very popular in the US design, a single gun and not a lot else, or several torpedo tubes, so it's heavily torpedo tube armament, but again a single level of gun. Now, comparable and contemporary destroyers built in the UK for overseas customers in South America, for instance, will seem to be better with greater tonnage, longer LOA and heavier ammunition. In 1916, orders were placed for 5 V-class flotilla leaders. All the ships had the name beginning with the letter V. These are 1,200 tons, over 312 feet LOA and 34 knots. And they had 4 main guns. These were singles, but the interesting point is they are super firing, both in A, B, X and Y positions, which gave them greater firepower for the same similar length of ship. I've really had a fascination with these long, tall forward funnels, which maybe make a model or two of these type of ships. So that's what came out later on in World War II, towards the end, 1718. Okay, and what I do. All right, this new arrangement then increased firepower. The innovation for super-firing guns was introduced in the C-class cruisers and the heavy cruisers of Hawkins class in the US in the UK. At the same time, a famous firm of shipbuilders, Thornycroft, in 1916-17 modified the order for the Admiralty to their own designs, becoming the Shakespeare class, with a small increase in displacement and the fitting of 4.7-inch main gun. This was due to reports that German destroyers were mounting 5-inch guns. The only near equivalent in the UK was the 4.7-inch army gun. Follow-up orders for more of this design brought about the name of V and W classes. Obviously, more V first names and W as the first letter of the later ones. The later ones, the W's of the V&W had 4.7-inch guns instead, have 2 2-pounders and 2 triple tube mounts. Some were completed and commissioned before the end of World War I, but the design rule was not as originally thought, because the last major fleet action at Jutland in 1916 was well past, so that role was not really applicable anymore in the First World War. Some of these ships then, after World War One, and many commissioned following the end of that war, some were converted to mine layers, as you can see here. Long rails were put on each side of the main deck, and round sinker mines, which would be sent over the stern, were put on. That was one of their roles, but mostly these were taken out later on. They were just normal ships with 4 or 4.7-inch guns. However, at the time, just after World War One, the Russian Revolution led to being deployed to the Baltic Sea in 1918 to protect the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Clashes with Bolshevik forces did occur in the Baltic Sea, but the seas were full of German and Russian mines, and it did lead to the loss of one UK cruiser, HMS Cassandra. Otherwise, they were very successful and venerable vessels were subsequently allocated to home waters, the Mediterranean, and the China Station. Over the 20 interwar years between World War One and World War Two, some suffered from old age and were eventually scrapped. But together with the London Naval Treaty 1930, limitations as to the number of ships and types of ships being reduced their potential. As World War II approached and was soon to break out, the deficiencies in escort ships became obvious. New ships, the Tribals, the I-class, J&K classes, and the Hunt classes escort destroyers were being delivered, having been planned just before outbreak of World War II. But in order to help fill the need for escort destroyers or convoys, repurposing some of the remaining V&W ships was made. A number of options were put forward. This picture now is a Hunt class destroyer. As you can see, single or twin guns forward and 2 twins further aft. They were very popular and huge numbers made for escorts across the North Atlantic in World War II. So coming back to the V&Ws, as the distance to cross the North Atlantic Ocean was too great for the existing escorts to complete without refueling part way. So if they were on duty across Atlantic escorting merchant convoys, this meant either taking fuel from a tanker or diverting to Iceland or Halifax, Nova Scotia. Tankers were in short supply. Not only was the direct line voyage from England to east coast of the USA had to be overcome, but the escorts were involved in chasing stragglers from the merchant ships and convoy and also following contacts with U-boats. Therefore, their fuel consumption was much greater than their sheer distance across the Atlantic. In order to build up the numbers of escort ships, some of the V&W destroyers were converted to long-range escorts, which is illustrated here. And I've done a line drawing to show you what was done. At the top is the existing arrangement for boilers, a single boiler with the forward tall fin funnel and 2 boilers under the short after funnel. What they did, they took out the boiler from the forward position, being a single one, and replaced it with an oil tank. So that then gave it a much longer range because it had much more oil fuel available, and the funnel was not needed anymore. So it made it look rather peculiar. Some additional anti-aircraft guns were also added. As the North Atlantic weather was also quite inhospitable at times, extra lagging and insulation was added to the accommodation spaces in these newly converted ships. Although they were relatively small ships, rather cramped originally, but the increase in personnel needed in wartime to operate weapons and radar, etc., accentuated the issue. The anti-submarine weaponry was increased with extra throws and depth charges. Of course, the main problem is attacks in the North Atlantic convoys was from U-boats. The appearance was not improved by its modifications, but also the forward funnel, in addition of the Type 271 lane-to radar on the bridge, but they're still capable of 25 knots rather than 34. Short-range escorts, those that could not be converted for the reason I described in the previous picture, were more developed and not suitable for conversions, but were used in the North Sea and apparently some went to West Africa. Apart from air attack, the opposition in the North Sea was from E-boats. These were fast attack boats usually wooden-hulled, carrying torpedoes as well on guns. The V&W destroyers had their original main armament of 4 or 4.7 inches, as you see here, but they had a slow rate of fire inadequate to fend off fast attacks. So what they did, they converted some of these V&W destroyers to have a twin 6-pounder gun, as you see in A position here, which was rapid firing and could fend off E-boats, which are very fast maneuverable torpedo boats. Another option of change was something called a weir, that is W-A-I-R. This shows a ship vanity converted to a weir. It has a forward twin 4-inch high-angle, low-angle gun middle, and similarly in exposition on the stern. Torpedo tubes were removed, and other anti-aircraft guns short-range, such as Oerlikons, were fitted, and that depended on the availability of getting these guns in time. Now, these were ideally for more anti-aircraft roles. Some were started converting for the breakout of World War II, and they were designed to be in the North Sea between the UK and Western Europe, because the convoys going up and down between Scotland and England were very much subject to German air attack over on France, etc. They had a new 3-level bridge with an HSTS on the bridge included, and forward of the bridge deckhouse was placed with a Zariba protection. Here's a drawing of the converted one. You can see the twin 4-inch guns forward and aft, no torpedo tubes, and in the bridge wings and in front of the searchlight there are 2 single Oerlikon anti-aircraft guns each. So this is the stripped down version, very useful in the North Sea. More anti-submarine equipment was added at the stern for depth charge rails and depth charges. You can see just after the after deck house, plenty more 291 at the top of the foremast, and like 2 fired radar and gallery control radar, plus other intercepts were added. So they used off the east coast of the UK, and some were sent to the Mediterranean too. Now, in summary, the V&W class were good sea boats with the well-built hull which lasted for many years, hence their longevity from the First World War through to the end of the Second. They were pioneers of super-firing main guns. They were later fitted with ASDIC or sonar for anti-submarine purposes. They were in action rescuing British and French troops at Boulogne and Dunkirk in the early part of World War II. Later, after modification, they played an integral part in escorting convoys in the North Atlantic, in the North Sea, Mediterranean, and some made their way to the Pacific. There were 5 V&W class destroyers in the Australian Navy, and these ships were sent to the Mediterranean to help out before a Japanese attack in December 1941, when they had to go back home to the Australian and West Pacific areas. This is HMS Vega. It's the weir conversion. You can see the gun mountings, 1 fore and aft, very similar to the drawing I made earlier. And this is the model of HMS Vega, which I'll be describing in my next talk later in the year. So it's the model line rather than the ship's development next time. Thank you.